everyone, welcome back to another video where today I want to talk a little bit about an insider for Disney apparently saying what they believe the issue is with Doctor Who on Disney Plus and the whole will they won't they in terms of the series renewal thing. And it's not actually to do with the ratings, but rather subscriptions. I'm going to go more into depth in just a second, but essentially this is a very interesting piece of information that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and it actually kind of shows the reality of streaming and how different the streaming world is from the TV world. We'll get right into it. Subscribe if you're new, that'd be greatly appreciated. Let's just get right into this. So I first became aware of this via Doctor Who production news, who said, according to someone who listened to the newest episode of 42 to Doomsday podcast, a Disney insider allegedly told a guest that while Doctor Who viewership was solid and met expectations, Disney Plus only retained 30% of those subscribers after they binged.
I heard some behind the scenes stuff, and it doesn't actually come from the BBC. It actually comes from a friend in America who works for Lucasfilm, so Disney, but under a different umbrella. And, well, he was sort of saying there's a few issues that Disney have with the series, but they were actually quite happy with the ratings. The Disney don't care about the ratings. What they care about is subscriptions. If you or me don't watch Doctor Who, it doesn't matter as long as we've got a Disney subscription. It means absolutely nothing to them how many times we watch an episode or how many minutes. It's just they wanted Doctor Who because it was another franchise that would bring new people who weren't Disney Plus members onto the Disney Plus channel buying a subscription. And he said the issue was this. Disney were really happy with how many people bought Disney subscriptions. And we're talking about people who bought it just to watch Doctor Who and didn't watch anything else at all. So they knew that they were Doctor Who fans and they were joining to watch the series. And there was enough of them that joined that Disney were quite happy for 4 weeks. Because at the end of 4 weeks, the free subscription runs out. And I heard they were expecting to get a 80% retention, and they got about a 30% retention, which was a really, really bad retention for the series. And so that was bad. And I think when you look at the timeline of Russell T Davies' attitude towards Doctor Who, for about the first 4 weeks, he was really positive. And then after that, he turned around and said, well, we don't even know if a third series is going to happen, and, it's all up in the air kind of thing.
And the Doctor Who production unit injects their own thoughts and says, and I have to ask, whose fault is that? Apparently 70% of the people who subscribed to watch Doctor Who didn't find much else on Disney Plus they wanted to watch, or maybe they binged Star Wars as well and then left. I found it more economical to subscribe for an entire year, and I don't binge, so I'm now watching 1 or 2 episodes of Andor a week. After completing The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, I also watched Hamilton. And then someone responded with, Disney has 2.5% of all streaming viewership and won't ever go further because of issues like this. It's a place where families go to watch babysitting shows like Bluey on repeat. And this was another thing they said in the podcast, that essentially some of the existing Disney crowd weren't so keen on Doctor Who for more of its kind of content that perhaps pushed the boundaries a bit, i.e. the kissing scene in Rogue. A lot of parents sort of used Disney Plus as a place for their kids to watch Bluey and stuff, and perhaps some of them weren't comfortable with that, which, I personally disagree with, but that's what the people on the podcast said.
America, it's probably more of a controversial thing to see in a show, 2 men kissing. For me, that wasn't the big issue with Rogue. One of the biggest rating things on Disney Plus is Bluey, the Australian show, which means that Disney Plus is used as a babysitting service for a lot of Americans, I guess. And if you watch Space Babies, which is the brand new episode, you go, well, this show is for kids. And, you can sit your child down in front of it. And then you've got people who maybe did that in the Bible Belt, and they come in and they watch Rogue with their kids, and they're like, well, we're not having this. That is one of the issues that I heard was happening behind the scenes.
But yeah, I have to reiterate what Doctor Who production news is saying here. At what point does it stop being Doctor Who's fault and start being Disney Plus's fault, in the sense of, if it is performing well, if the numbers of people watching it are good, but they're watching Doctor Who and then leaving, that's not really on Doctor Who, that's on Disney Plus. They also say in the podcast that for the first 4 weeks, obviously, people get a month free trial, So the numbers were really up then, and then after those following 4 weeks it went down, which is to be expected. Which would also explain why in those initial couple of weeks, Russell was really confident about the future and talking about how, there was going to be season after season after season, and then later on he was like, oh, no decision on season 2 has been made yet. That would make a lot of sense, and now you could say, well, if they're not continuing their subscriptions after the first month, surely that's an indication that people thought the series got worse or declined in quality as the series went on. But the podcast also states that after the series all ended, i.e. after the 8 episodes came out, there was another huge spike in Disney Plus subscriptions specifically for Doctor Who, and they know it's for Doctor Who because that's the only things people watched on those accounts. So basically people subscribed to start Doctor Who, and then a bunch of other people subscribed at the end to binge watch all of it, because binge watching is a massive part of streaming culture.
And then the other thing that happened, a lot of people waited for the whole series to be released so they could binge watch it. And the same thing happened again, where Disney were kind of happy because when the whole series was released, a whole lot of people joined up to Disney Plus again just to watch Doctor Who. And they got their free month, and then they didn't stay members, so they got to watch it for free. So one of the issues they're having isn't the ratings. I've heard they really don't care about the ratings. That's more of a British thing. And really how ratings are calculated is all up in the air. And I think it's pretty hard to argue one way or the other because there isn't really a standard that we can measure it against anymore. But Disney are all about the money, and the money wasn't as much as they thought it was going to be. I've heard it's kind of on, I guess it's been parked till January, and they're going to see what happens with the Christmas special and what happens next year. Maybe they'll retool some of what they have filmed to make it more of what Disney want, or maybe Russell T Davies will put his foot down and go, no, we're doing exactly what we did the first time round, which I think is probably more likely because he's been told Disney will give him notes, but he doesn't have to take any of them. But I guess we'll see at Christmas and next year what happens.
To wrap all this up, essentially what it seems like to me is that Doctor Who was a big name that pulled in a big initial audience. That audience then was on Disney Plus, but didn't really see much outside of the Doctor Who ecosystem, aside from maybe Star Wars that actually appealed to them, and then left. And then you had a second wave of people who came on for the streaming, because Disney saying that the number of people who actually streamed it is solid is evidence to me that it's not a case of nobody watching it. It's more a case of the people who did watch it didn't stay subscribed to Disney Plus as a whole, which is ultimately what Disney care about, because Disney make the same amount of money whether you watch every episode of Doctor Who 500 times or whether you watch Doctor Who once. The only number that matters is how long you stay subscribed, because that's how they make their money. So the reluctance for Disney to renew the deal seems to come more from this idea of Doctor Who fans and people who subscribe to Doctor Who not sticking around on Disney Plus, which again, I reiterate, is that Doctor Who's fault, or is that Disney's fault for not having a more varied catalogue that appeals to more people? I'll let you decide that, but it's interesting nonetheless. They also do say on the podcast that they are waiting until January with the Christmas special to see how that does, which kind of indicates what I said in a recent video where I said basically Christmas is a very important time for Doctor Who to do well, because that's normally when Doctor Who gets its highest number, and that will kind of give us an indication of whether Disney are interested in continuing this deal or not. I do want to say that this is obviously someone who has a friend at Disney, so obviously take it with a grain of salt. I personally have never listened to this podcast before, and not everything they said I agreed with, just in terms of the show itself, but it was definitely an interesting listen. They talk a lot about merchandise in this episode, and particularly from the Australian perspective, how Doctor Who's doing. So it is an interesting listen, and I'll leave it at the top of the description. The other thing I'm curious about is if the issue is retaining subscribers who subscribe for Doctor Who, whether getting the classic catalogue, i.e. the classic series and 2005 onwards Doctor Who, on Disney Plus would help mitigate that issue, which could potentially be why we're waiting on a further decision from Disney. Maybe they're trying to negotiate getting more of the back catalogue onto the service, which would stop the bleed of Doctor Who subscribers basically leaving after they get their fill on Doctor Who. It'll probably also help that next year we have a Doctor Who spin-off, The War Between Land and the Sea, coming out as well, which could keep those Doctor Who subscribers around for a bit longer. But what are your thoughts on any of this? Let me know down in the comments below. Please like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.